What the...
Milk is a nutritionally complete food that contains almost everything that's needed for survival and growth. Whole milk contains 6 major components: vitamins, proteins, minerals, fats, sugars, and water. In terms of vitamins, there are 2 major types: water-soluble and fat-soluble. The water-soluble ones are pretty constant, but the level of fat-soluble vitamins depends on the fat content. When fat is removed from milk to produce things like skim milk, some of the fat-soluble vitamins are taken out with it. Because of this, vitamins like vitamin A and vitamin D are usually added after the fat is removed. There are many different proteins in milk, but the 2 main types are casein and whey. The proportion of each will vary depending on the milk source. For example, most of the protein in cow's milk is casein, but most of the protein in human milk is whey. I'm going to go into more detail about the proteins later in the video. Milk is a good source of minerals, and I've listed the major ones here. Many of them are present as salt compounds, for example calcium phosphate, which is a combination of calcium and phosphorus. A large portion of the minerals are associated with the casein proteins, and the rest are dissolved in the water. The fat in milk is a mixture of triglycerides. Triglycerides don't mix with water, and in milk, they're present as an extremely fine suspension of small droplets. If we take a look at the structure, we can see that it's a bunch of long molecules attached to a small backbone. The backbone is made from glycerin, and the tails come from a group of molecules known as fatty acids. A lot of fatty acids are quite stinky, but not when they're incorporated into a triglyceride. When milk goes bad, the triglycerides start to break down, which releases the stinky fatty acids. In terms of sugar, the main one is lactose. Lactose is known as a disaccharide because it's a combination of 2 smaller sugars, glucose and galactose. People who are lactose intolerant lack an enzyme called lactase, which normally breaks the bond between these 2 sugars. So for this video, I'm going to be separating some milk into the different components that I just mentioned. Milk is routinely processed into many different things like cheese and protein supplements, and I thought it might be interesting to show you guys where this comes from. So to separate the milk, I just need a few things: sodium carbonate, acetic acid, and ethanol. The only component that I won't be separating out here is the fat, and that's because it's done using a centrifuge. I really don't have the proper setup to do that, so I'm starting with skim milk. If you decide to repeat the process that I'm doing here, it's really important that you use skim milk because any fat will mess things up. A magnetic stir bar is added to a beaker, and I pour in about 200 milliliters of skim milk. I turn on the stirring and the heat, and then I add a thermometer. The goal now is to heat the milk to about 40 to 50 C and to keep it there for 15 minutes. From this angle, it might be hard to tell, but it is in fact stirring. Anyway, after 15 minutes, the thermometer is removed, and I start to add acetic acid. The acetic acid is added in small portions, and I wait several seconds between each addition. After the second addition, a lot of solid stuff starts to form. This solid stuff is casein protein that's precipitating out of solution. In milk, casein exists as its calcium salt called calcium caseinate. The structure of the salt is complex, and it's composed of 3 forms of casein: alpha, beta, and kappa. Together, they form a stable structure called a micelle. Part of the kappa casein has a lot of polar residues, which can favorably interact with water. So on its polar side, it interacts with water, and on its non-polar side, it's in contact with the alpha and beta caseins. Here's an artistic structure of the casein micelle. Each circle is a submicelle, which is a mixture of all 3 types of caseins. The outside layer is enriched with kappa caseins, and internally, the submicelles are held together by calcium phosphate interactions. The micelles are not
Now we know all about milk.